Welcome to the Trial Site News Roundup series. Today on our program we'll be discussing two stories. The first is about the World Health Organization, which appears to be eyeing the possibility of protecting ivermectin from use for COVID-19, as it plans to emerge out of the pandemic and refocus on neglected tropical diseases programs. Then we discuss Wikipedia and ask the question: who is declaring what is legitimate information versus misinformation on that platform? And so, from Trial Site News, I'm Adrian, and our episode starts now. So recently, the World Health Organization conducted its 14th meeting of the Strategic and Technical Advisory Group for Neglected Tropical Diseases, otherwise known as NTD, held virtually from June 22nd to June 24th of this year. Known as STAG, or the Strategic and Technical Advisory Group, they published a number of recommendations including the potential implications of COVID-19 on neglected tropical diseases. With so much health authority attention on COVID-19, the hundreds of millions of people at risk for the neglected tropical diseases face greater risks as programs languished in the pandemic. And so, the World Health Organization's STAG group shared that the predicted and emerging empirical evidence suggests possibly profound impacts of the pandemic on the organization's various programs dealing with NTD. Consequently, the STAG group suggests that first and foremost health systems in the various countries should prepare for not only greater numbers of NTDs, but also more intense transmission of infection, followed by accumulating disability as a consequence of the pandemic and the associated intense focus on fighting COVID-19, to the detriment of other programs such as leprosy and cutaneous leishmaniasis. Now, the World Health Organization's STAG positions that medicines such as ivermectin that are not proven must be protected from diversion, meaning used by health authorities, such as in Indonesia, where the national drug regulator has authorized use of ivermectin to combat COVID-19 during this latest intense spike of the pandemic there. Interestingly, the World Health Organization anticipates the possibility that ivermectin will be deemed effective, declaring, even in the event of efficacy of such drugs against COVID-19 being established, the agreement of medicine donors for repurposing be obtained before the donations are used for that purpose. So the question must be asked: is the World Health Organization preparing to control the distribution of the drug for targeted use against SARS-CoV-2? Now, the World Health Organization's STAG group goes on with a recommendation for other urgent actions, such as the avoidance of expiry and stockouts due to delays in program implementation. Now, the World Health Organization doesn't want to lose ground against key neglected tropical diseases and get back on track on reaching 2030 targets as defined in their 2021 through 2030 NTD roadmap. For example, the World Health Organization has concerns of pandemic-related hits on funding impacting NTD programs generally, and with specific concern for outbreaks of visceral leishmaniasis and dracunculiasis in East Africa and South Asia, for example, it would appear, at least from the point of view of STAG, that the world is emerging out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it is time again to focus on mission-critical NTD programs that represent a vital lifeline for hundreds of millions of people living in abject poverty. And so it seems that they have their eyes on ivermectin, whether it is deemed efficacious or not, for COVID-19. Now, for the second half of the roundup, we're going to talk about Wikipedia, which purports to be an objective, non-biased online knowledge repository seeking to create and distribute a free encyclopedia of the highest possible quality to every single person on the planet in their own language. Undoubtedly, this information should be truthful and as unbiased as possible. Now, for those tracking the ivermectin studies during this pandemic, Wikipedia is starting to look anything but unbiased. A casual perusal of the COVID-19 misinformation is a telling place to start. Under ivermectin, the wiki authors diss the existing meta-analysis evidencing positive ivermectin findings. They argue that based on one analysis, the meta-analysis used at least in part by the World Health Organization to track ivermectin during the pandemic has serious methodological limitations and casts doubt on the importance of that work. Now, the Wikipedia authors then turned their attention on Dr. Pierre Corey and Paul Merrick of the Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance, or the FLCCC, declaring that while their meta-analysis was initially accepted by Frontiers Media, it was subsequently rejected. However, the question should be raised. How come the Wikipedia authors didn't share the truth that the meta-analysis was published in the American Journal of Therapeutics? Why would the Wiki authors exclude the Bird Group Ivermectin meta-analysis, also included by peer-reviewed American Journal of Therapeutics? Why didn't Wiki's experts share with the world that the National Institutes of Health COVID-19 Treatment Guidelines panel invited the very same Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance group, along with Dr. Andrew Hill, to share with the panel their findings? Or, for that matter, share with the world that just a couple of weeks after that meeting, that the NIH Treatment Guidelines panel changed their ivermectin guidance from a negative, only for research, to a neutral position, not enough data to recommend for or against. Now, we here at Trial Site News find it interesting how selective Wiki has become during this pandemic. While it was able to secure all content from the World Health Organization in a deal back in October of 2020, the authors didn't bother to share that the same global health agency has been watching ivermectin carefully. In fact, Dr. Maria Van Kerkhove went on the record at a February 2021 media briefing that the World Health Organization at the time had peered into the data associated with 1,500 study patients in 11 studies, and that while there wasn't sufficient data for them to make any recommendations, there was most certainly some promising trials and associated data. The World Health Organization emphasized that they would continue to monitor the situation. So, this then begs the question: why wouldn't that, and everything that I've just mentioned, be included unless there's an explicit goal to completely discredit this possible therapeutic option and the various researchers looking into the matter? The point here is that the world's communication channels, from the social tech giants such as Facebook and Twitter to fundamental knowledge repositories such as Wikipedia, exhibit an anti-ivermectin bias by portraying the facts in a way that becomes misleading. This then leads us to another question. Is it misleading to omit whole pieces of truth? Well, we here at Trial Site News think it is. Trial Site News as a company was set up in late 2018 to track pharma studies with an aim of bringing more transparency to the whole clinical trials process, with a particular emphasis on the trial site. We appreciate pharma, the breakthroughs, and the medicines that many take for granted today. Patient volunteer shortages are a continuous problem for clinical trials. Our company's original premise, that a more dynamic and participatory research with greater patient engagement could over time lead to an acceleration of key medicines. While pharma may think they are doing a good job of engagement with patients and the general public, we beg to differ. We believe here at Trial Site News that true participatory research follows a formula, starting with awareness raising, but must include research transparency and accessibility of information, followed by bidirectional engagement. Frankly, as the pandemic here commenced, we here at Trial Site News had no interest in ivermectin other than finding it intriguing that an existing repurposed drug could potentially help treat people. We knew that much research would proceed, but what we didn't expect was not only the incredible resistance to this research from all major media sources, but also the open hostility directed at any group that publishes such findings. Wikipedia itself is a good example of lumping ivermectin in the misinformation campaign without any other factual points of view. Interestingly, among all the regulatory agencies that Wikipedia offers as examples for regulatory capture, the one group conspicuously absent is the Food and Drug Administration. And that, my friends, brings our episode to a close once more. From Trial Site News, I'm Adrian, and I will see you all next time.